Good morning everyone and welcome in the exercise 3. So you had to do previously that table for the exercise 2 where you summarized the 4 different graphs that you have to know. You have the straight line that we already saw in detail. You have the parabola, the hyperbola and the exponential graph. So now that you know those 4 types, we're going to enter in detail into the parabola graph. Alright, so that's the exercise 3, and I rewrote here the general equation for a parabola. So what makes a parabola? It's that you have an squared on the x. So all the square is on the bracket here, or the square is directly on the x there. Those two formulas have exactly the same meaning. So you can write it this way, as a bracket x minus p squared plus q, or y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. That is exactly the same thing, it's just a different way to write it. So I'm just going to show you that it is the same thing, then you don't wonder why sometimes we use one form and sometimes the other form. Alright, so here I wrote the general equation with the p and the q value. Here I'm going to take an example as y equals 2. 2 is the value for a, bracket x minus 1. So here the minus 1 is the value for the minus p. And plus squared plus 1, where the plus q is here the plus 1. Alright, and now I'm just going to distribute and simplify this form. And you're going to see I'm going to get this ax squared plus bx plus c at the end. Let's do it. So for the moment, I'm going to get first into the bracket with the priority of the square on the bracket. So that's a minus b squared. Be careful, I need to open it with 2 brackets, and that's a trinomial. So that's the first one squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So this bracket squared gives me x squared minus 2x plus 1. Right, now I'm going to have the priority on the multiplication, so I distribute the 2 into the bracket. That will give me 2x squared minus 4x plus 2. And I still have that plus 1 at the end. Now, I simplify the like term together, so the first is the squared, 2x squared minus 4x, and I've got a plus 2 plus 1 that I simplify into a plus 3. So this is my final simplified form of that equation. And if you can see, 2x squared minus 4x plus 3 is exactly this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. The a is 2, the b is minus 4, and the c is 3. So those two forms are similar, it's just the way they are written that is different. Alright. So, this was the first part for the general equation. Here I wrote the positive a is making a u facing up for the parabola, and if you have a negative a in front of your equation, your u is now facing down. So that's a positive parabola, that's a negative parabola. But the formula is the same, it's just the sign of the letter A. Alright, then, if we focus on this equation with the P and the Q, I want to show you what is the effect of the value P and the value Q. So, we saw the A is making a positive A facing up, a negative a facing down. So now the P, as written here, is the one that's going to shift your parabola right or left. Because the P applied on the x value, if you noticed here, the P is right in front of the x. So the P changes the x value, which is going to change the x-axis, so it's going to shift the parabola right or left. Then we have the Q value, and the Q is the one shifting up or down. As you can see, the q value is last in the equation, so it applies on the full equation, so that applies on the y value. And if you change the y value of a graph, you're going to change on the y-axis, so it's going to change your graph and shift it up or down. Alright, so let's look in detail the effect for p. As you noticed, the p value is always written as a minus p in the equation. You see here, it's x minus p. So, if I take this equation as an example here, what would be the p-value of this example? I've got x minus p, and that's a x minus 1, which means that my minus p is equal to a minus 1, right? The minus p is equal to the minus 1. So that is, I can time by minus 1 left and right. That makes that the p-value is a positive one, right? The p-value is the opposite sign because it's a minus p for minus 1. So the p is a 1. Therefore, if I'm adding a plus 1 to my x-axis, I'm shifting 1 unit to the right. Alright, same with the q value. Here, the last one here is the q value. So plus q equals plus 1. So if q equals 1, this one is straightforward. There is no change in the sign. So if I've got a plus 1 on the y-axis, I'm shifting this graph 1 unit up. So for this one, the p is 1, shift 1 unit right. The q is 1, shift 1 unit up. Good. Let's just describe quickly the two examples I gave you. Right, first one. We had this as an example. Y equals x minus 2 squared. So here, what is the p-value? The p, because minus p is minus 2, then the p is 2. So this graph is going to be shifted 2 units to the right. And what about the q value? Well, there is nothing at the end. There is no q at the end, so the q is 0. Then there is no shift up or down. So let's compare the two graphs now. The pink one is the basic one, x squared. And now I'm comparing it with the x minus 2 squared. And look, it's shifted 2 units to the right. No shift up or down, it's on the same x-axis. It's just shifted 2 units to the right. Alright. Second one. Now I'm going to compare to the basic x squared. This one, x minus 2 squared minus 3. Alright, so here the p value is a 2 because minus p is minus 2, so p is 2. I shifted 2 units right. And the q is minus 3. If the q is minus 3, that shifts 3 units down. Let's compare the two graphs. The pink one is the original x squared, and if I'm shifting 2 units to the right and 3 units down, I'm getting the green line. X minus 2 squared minus 3. So you see, p right left and q up down. So you just need to read what is the coefficient, what is the value for p and q, and you will see how is it shifted. So now you have the homework. So there is two graphs to draw. First one, you sketch y equals x squared and you call it f. So that's your basic equation, your basic first graph. And on the same set of axes, you're going to draw this line, y equals x minus 1 squared minus 2. So you draw it. You draw both on the same set of axes, and I hope you remember now how you draw graphs. So you take the equation and you use the table. So you choose 5x value. For instance, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. You choose those 5 values and then you substitute in the equation. You take x is -2. If I replace x by -2, what is the value of the y? So you're using the homework equation and you calculate the 5 y's. Then you plot all the dots and you link. You should know it must give you a parabola. Alright, so be careful. If you don't have a parabola, it means you have mistakes with signs or with calculations. So be careful with the priority of the brackets, minus, etc., etc. Alright, and when you have your two parabola on the same set of axes, then you tell me, how is it shifted? Is it shifted 1 unit to the right, 2 unit down? Is it shifted 1 unit left and 2 unit up? So you must describe the shift. So you have 2 of these to do. Right? And then you send me a picture of the work for tomorrow. Alright, enjoy. Bye bye.